The small, single-story brick house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, its paint sun-faded and its porch creaking with age. Yet, to anyone who knew Marcus Daniels, that house wasn't just a structure of brick and mortar. It was history. It was the weight of family, the kind of inheritance that wasn't measured in dollars but in sacrifice. Marcus, a 42-year-old Army veteran, had grown up in that home. His late father, a Vietnam vet, had bought it with a GI loan after years of scraping together savings while working night shifts at a steel plant. Every inch of the house carried memory, the pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe where Marcus's height had been tracked, the backyard oak tree under which his father used to sit on Sundays, beer in hand, humming blues. Now, as Marcus walked across the creaking porch boards, he felt the same quiet pride his father must have felt decades ago. This was the Daniels family's anchor. A black family's claim to permanence in a neighborhood that, in his father's time, hadn't been welcoming. Inside, the house smelled faintly of wood polish and coffee. Marcus's wife, Denise, was folding laundry at the dining table, her face calm but her movements deliberate. Their daughter, Kayla, only 10, was sprawled on the floor coloring. She looked up at her father with wide eyes, the kind of eyes that still believed heroes wore uniforms and always came back home safe. "Daddy, are you gonna leave again?" she asked softly, her crayon pausing mid-stroke. Marcus crouched down beside her, brushing her braids back from her face. "Only for a little while, baby girl. Just doing my job. You know how Grandpa always said we protect what matters?" Kayla nodded slowly. "Like this house?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Exactly like this house." He stood, glancing at Denise, who met his gaze with a look that carried both strength and the unspoken dread of another deployment. They had been through this before, the goodbyes, the long months of silence, the waiting. Yet this time felt heavier. Maybe it was because Kayla was older and more aware. Or maybe it was because Marcus himself was tired of missing birthdays, anniversaries, and small ordinary moments that couldn't be replaced. Denise broke the silence. "Everything will be fine here. Don't worry about us." He wanted to believe her. But even as she spoke, Marcus felt the nagging unease of something beyond his control. The HOA, those 3 letters had caused more tension in his household than bills or broken appliances ever could. The Daniels family had dealt with the HOA's new president, Sylvia Whitaker, for over a year now. A middle-aged woman with a permanent smile that never reached her eyes, Sylvia had a reputation for keeping the neighborhood in order. She nitpicked about Marcus's grass length, complained about his American flag being too large, and once even tried to fine Denise for leaving Kayla's bicycle in the driveway overnight. Marcus had brushed it off. He'd fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. Sylvia's petty rules weren't a battle worth losing sleep over. But Denise, practical as ever, worried. "She's not just annoying, Marcus. She's dangerous in her own way. She knows how to twist rules." Marcus waved it away back then. Now, as he stood in the kitchen doorway, watching his family framed against the warmth of the home his father had built, her words echoed in his mind. "Promise me something," Denise said, stepping closer. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Promise me you won't stop fighting for this house, no matter what." He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "This house is Daniel's blood. Nobody takes it away from us." They kissed, long and slow, while Kayla groaned theatrically from the floor, "You, gross." The moment lightened the air, but only for a beat. Because the truth was, Marcus's orders had come. He'd be deploying in less than 2 weeks. That night, Marcus sat on the porch alone, staring out at the darkened street. He thought about his father's hands, scarred, strong, always working to keep this home standing. He thought about Kayla's small voice asking if he'd come back. And he thought about Denise, who deserved peace after years of holding down the fort in his absence. The stars stretched wide above him, cold and infinite. Marcus whispered into the night, as though speaking to his father's spirit. "I'll protect them. I'll protect this house. I swear it." He didn't yet know that the real battle wasn't waiting for him overseas, it was brewing right here, in the neighborhood he called home. And Sylvia Whitaker was sharpening her claws. Sylvia Whitaker liked to think of herself as the guardian of Willow Creek Estates. The neighborhood wasn't much, 24 suburban homes tucked behind a white vinyl fence, but to Sylvia, it was her kingdom. And she ruled with a clipboard in one hand and the HOA bylaws in the other. Every morning, she woke at 6 sharp, slipped into her pastel suit, and perched at her breakfast nook with a steaming mug of chamomile tea. From there, she looked out across the manicured lawns, making mental notes of every flaw. A recycling bin left out past pickup day. A fence a shade darker than HOA-approved beige. A flagpole just a few inches taller than regulation. She wrote everything down, relishing the power of enforcement. Her neighbors tolerated her because they had to. Sylvia's grip on the HOA board was ironclad. She had charmed 2 retired couples into serving as her loyal yes-men and bullied anyone who dared to question her interpretations of the rules. For Sylvia, the bylaws weren't about order, they were about leverage. And Marcus Daniels? He was her favorite target. She had despised him from the moment he moved back into his late father's house with his wife and little girl. The house was too old, she said, dragging down property values. His flag annoyed her. His comings and goings at odd hours irritated her. And worst of all, his stubborn refusal to grovel under her authority made her seethe. Sylvia prided herself on being able to bend every neighbor eventually. But Marcus didn't bend. One evening, after issuing yet another fine for unapproved modifications, the offense, repainting the porch without her paperwork, Sylvia sat in her kitchen with her husband Harold. Harold, an accountant with little backbone, muttered, "You really don't like that guy, do you?" Sylvia's lips curled into a thin smile. "It's not about liking. It's about precedent. If he thinks he can ignore the rules, others will follow. And then what happens, Harold? Chaos. Decline. Property values tank. No. Marcus Daniels is a problem. And problems must be solved." She didn't say it aloud, but her dislike of Marcus ran deeper than bylaws. To her, he represented something she could never control: dignity. Pride. A kind of unshakable self-respect that mocked her own insecurities. He didn't ask her permission to exist in the neighborhood. He simply lived, loudly, proudly, like he belonged. And that infuriated her. Her opportunity came quietly, hidden in the HOA's endless stack of paperwork. Buried within bylaws was an obscure clause about abandoned properties and the HOA's right to reclaim them for delinquent dues. No one had ever invoked it, it was meant for houses left truly vacant for years. But in Sylvia's hands, it became a weapon. All she needed was Marcus to slip. And she knew he would. Soldiers always left. Deployments were her leverage. At the next HOA board meeting, she slid the clause across the table to her 2 loyal allies, Mr. and Mrs. Emerson. They squinted at the fine print, confused. "You're saying if someone falls behind on dues, and the property appears vacant," Mrs. Emerson trailed off. "We can reclaim it," Sylvia finished smoothly. "Protecting the neighborhood from decline. It's our duty." "But Marcus pays his dues," Mr. Emerson pointed out. Sylvia's smile sharpened. "For now. But what happens when he's overseas? What if payments are delayed? What if his wife struggles to keep up? We can't risk it. We'll need to be proactive." The Emersons exchanged uneasy glances but nodded. They trusted Sylvia. Everyone did, or at least, they pretended to. That night, Sylvia walked the cul-de-sac under the dim glow of street lamps, her heels clicking against the pavement. She stopped in front of the Daniels home, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. The American flag rippled above the porch in the night wind, bold and unbending. Sylvia sneered. "Enjoy it while you can," she muttered under her breath. "Because once you're gone, Marcus Daniels, this house will belong to someone who respects the rules. Someone like me." Inside the Daniels' living room, Kayla slept curled against Denise's side on the couch, unaware of the storm brewing just outside their door. And for Sylvia, the storm was only beginning. The envelope was heavy in Marcus's hands, though it weighed no more than a sheet of paper. Orders. His battalion had been called up, another rotation, another goodbye. He stared at the crisp government letterhead under the kitchen light as if by sheer willpower he could change what it said. Denise stood across from him, arms folded tight, her jaw clenched. How long this time? 9 months, Marcus answered. His voice was steady, but inside he felt the familiar ache hollowing out his chest. 9 months was nearly a year. In a child's life, it might as well be forever. From the hallway came the sound of Kayla's laughter, high and untroubled as she played with her dolls. For a fleeting moment, Marcus wanted to crumple the orders and shove them into the trash. Pretend they'd never arrived. Stay. But that wasn't who he was. He had taken an oath his father had once carried too. Denise moved closer, her hand brushing his. You always come back, she whispered, though her eyes betrayed the fear behind the words. He kissed her forehead, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair, grounding himself in the life he was about to leave behind. Always, he murmured. The next days passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus packed uniforms, boots, and a few small comforts, photos, Kayla's hand-drawn picture of the three of them, folded carefully into his rucksack. At night, he lingered at the dinner table, stretching out meals just to watch Denise laugh or hear Kayla chatter about school. Every moment felt sharper, outlined in the knowledge of its impermanence. On the Saturday before his departure, the Daniels hosted a small cookout in their backyard. Neighbors drifted in and out, offering handshakes and murmured thanks for his service. Old Mr. Jenkins from 2 houses down brought ribs, the Johnson kids chased Kayla through the grass. But not everyone came. Sylvia Whitaker did not cross the street. She stood at her window instead, peering through lace curtains, watching the smoke from Marcus's grill curl into the sky. Parading like he owns the block, she muttered to Harold, who was half watching a baseball game in the next room. The man doesn't even bother to check his mailbox on time. Just wait. 9 months gone, and that house will look abandoned. We'll be the ones cleaning up his mess. Harold grunted, too used to her tirades to argue. Out in the yard, Marcus laughed with his daughter as she climbed onto his back, her tiny arms clutching his neck. For a moment, everything felt normal, untouched by duty or corruption. But the shadow across the street, Sylvia's narrowed eyes, promised otherwise. The morning of departure arrived gray and overcast. Marcus's duffel bags sat by the door like silent sentinels. Kayla clung to his leg, refusing to let go. I'll miss you every day, Daddy, she whispered into his uniform. I'll miss you too, baby girl. But you know what? He crouched down, pulling something from his pocket. It was a small brass keychain shaped like a shield, engraved with the word strength. This is for you. Whenever you're scared or sad, hold it, and remember your dad is strong enough to come back home. Kayla's lip trembled, but she nodded, clutching the keychain like treasure. Denise wrapped her arms around him next, burying her face in his chest. She didn't cry, she rarely did, but her grip told him everything words couldn't. At the curb, the army transport van idled, its engine rumbling like a clock ticking down. Marcus took one last look at the house, the faded bricks, the porch swing his father had built, the flag waving stubbornly above. He breathed it all in, storing it in memory like oxygen. Then he turned and walked away. Across the street, Sylvia watched from her porch, a smile tugging at her lips. She saw the duffel bags, the tearful goodbyes, the way Denise's shoulders sagged as the van pulled away. Opportunity. That's what she saw. And as the taillights disappeared down the road, Sylvia whispered to herself, "Tick-tock, Sergeant Daniels. Your time is running out." The first weeks after Marcus left were always the hardest. The house felt too quiet without his heavy boots crossing the floor, too empty without his deep laugh filling the rooms. Denise tried to keep busy, school runs with Kayla, her shifts at the library, evenings sorting bills at the kitchen table. But late at night, When the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, the loneliness pressed in like a weight. She reminded herself of Marcus's words, "Nobody takes this house away from us." It was their anchor, their inheritance. She paid the mortgage faithfully, kept up with the utilities, and double-checked the HOA dues. Even when exhaustion tugged at her bones, she made sure the check was mailed on time. But Sylvia had been waiting. One Tuesday morning, Denise opened her mailbox and froze. Among the usual junk mail and school flyers was a thick envelope stamped HOA violation notice. She ripped it open, her stomach tightening as her eyes scanned the page. Unapproved modifications, it read. Failure to maintain lawn to community standards. And below that, outstanding dues, $150. Denise frowned. She had mailed the dues. Just last week. She pulled her checkbook, flipping back through carbon copies until she found it, a payment for the exact amount, dated and signed. Her phone call to Sylvia that afternoon was curt. "There's been a mistake. I paid." Sylvia's syrupy voice oozed through the line. "Oh, Denise, I'm sure you thought you did. But the records show otherwise. Perhaps your check was lost in the mail." "It happens, dear." "I have proof," Denise shot back. "A carbon copy." Sylvia chuckled softly. "A carbon copy is not proof of receipt. You'll need to submit payment again. And until then, fines will continue to accrue." Denise gripped the phone tighter, heat rising in her chest. "This is harassment." "My dear," Sylvia said smoothly, "this is procedure. I'm only protecting the neighborhood." When the line clicked dead, Denise stood in the kitchen, trembling. She wanted to scream, but Kayla's soft humming drifted in from the living room, grounding her. Denise couldn't afford to collapse. She would pay again if she had to. The house mattered more than her pride. Behind closed doors, Sylvia celebrated small victories. She had deliberately misplaced Denise's first check. A quiet phone call to the HOA's part-time bookkeeper, a woman easily intimidated, ensured it was marked not received. Now Denise would scramble, stressed and vulnerable. And it wouldn't stop there. At the next board meeting, Sylvia leaned across the table, her nails tapping against the bylaw book. "The Daniels property is at risk," she declared. "Repeated violations. Unpaid dues. It's becoming a blight." Mrs. Emerson frowned. "But Denise keeps the place tidy. I see her mowing the lawn herself." "Appearances deceive," Sylvia countered smoothly. "The bylaws are clear. And if a property is neglected or dues delinquent," she slid the clause across the table again, "we have the right to reclaim it." Mr. Emerson adjusted his glasses nervously. "That's extreme." Sylvia's smile was ice. "Extreme? Or responsible? Think of the neighborhood's reputation. Think of property values. We must act before the situation worsens." By the end of the meeting, she had what she wanted, a motion passed, quietly, without public notice, that authorized the HOA board to begin repossession proceedings if the Daniels account remained delinquent. It was a small crack, but Sylvia knew how to wedge a crowbar into cracks until the whole structure collapsed. Denise, meanwhile, tried to shield Kayla from the growing tension. When another notice arrived, this one threatening legal action, she folded it into her purse before her daughter could see. But Kayla wasn't blind. She saw the tight lines around her mother's eyes, the way her laughter sounded thinner now. One night, as Denise tucked her into bed, Kayla whispered, "Mommy, are we gonna lose our house?" Denise froze, then forced a smile. "No, baby. This house is ours. Daddy said so." But when Kayla's breathing softened into sleep, Denise sat in the dark by her daughter's side, clutching her hands together until her knuckles went white. Because in the pit of her stomach, she wasn't so sure anymore. Across the street, Sylvia stood on her porch sipping wine, the Daniels house reflected in her eyes like prey caught in a predator's gaze. The game had begun. The letter arrived on a rainy Thursday. Denise tore it open at the kitchen counter, her hands already shaking from weeks of dread. The words blurred as her eyes raced down the page. Notice of foreclosure and auction. The property located at 112 Oakwood Lane will be sold at public auction to recover unpaid dues and penalties. Her breath caught. She read it again, slower this time, hoping it would change. But the words stayed the same, black ink carved into her fate. No, no, this can't be happening, she whispered. Kayla was in the living room, singing to her dolls. Denise pressed the paper against her chest, her knees nearly buckling. She had mailed the payments twice. She had mowed, trimmed, painted. She had begged the board to explain. None of it mattered. Sylvia had won. The auction was held in the county courthouse, a sterile room with folding chairs and a podium. Denise sat in the back row, Kayla's hand clutched in hers, her stomach in knots. The bidders were strangers, men in suits, women with clipboards, real estate investors who never looked her way. To them, the Daniels home was just another undervalued property. To Denise, it was her life. Sylvia stood near the front, immaculate in a pale blue suit, her smile polite but triumphant. She caught Denise's eye once, and in that smile Denise read everything. You were never going to win. The auctioneer's gavel struck. Numbers flew, shouted across the room. Denise sat frozen, her nails digging into her daughter's palm. Kayla whispered, Mommy, what's happening? Why are they saying our house? Denise couldn't answer. Within minutes, the house her father-in-law had bought with a soldier's loan, the house Marcus had sworn to protect, the house where Kayla had taken her first steps, was gone. Sold to the highest bidder for a fraction of its worth. The gavel slammed a final time. Sold! It echoed like a gunshot in Denise's ears. Outside the courthouse, the sky had turned the color of steel. Denise stood on the steps, clutching Kayla close as rain began to fall. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely fish her phone from her purse. She dialed Marcus overseas. The call was staticky, delayed, but his voice came through, steady as always. Hey, baby. How are you holding up? Denise tried to answer, but her throat closed. The words tumbled out broken. They sold the house, Marcus. Sylvia, the HOA, they took it from us. Silence stretched across the line. For a moment she thought the call had dropped. Then came his voice, quiet, controlled, the kind of calm that carried the weight of fury beneath it. They did what? Tears spilled hot down Denise's cheeks. I tried. I paid, I swear I paid, but they... Stop, Marcus said firmly. This isn't on you. Do you hear me? Not one damn bit of this is your fault. His voice cracked for the first time. They stole our home. In the background she heard the muffled sounds of base life, boots on gravel, engines roaring. Marcus exhaled sharply. Listen to me. Hold on. Don't leave that house until they force you out. And tell Kayla, tell her daddy's coming. The line clicked dead, the satellite signal dropping. Denise stood on the courthouse steps, the rain soaking her clothes, clutching her daughter's trembling hand. For the first time since Marcus had left, she wasn't just lonely. She was scared. Across town, Sylvia celebrated with a glass of champagne. From her porch she looked at the Daniels house, now marked for eviction, and felt a rush of satisfaction. Finally, she whispered. Order restored. But she didn't know that Marcus had already set his jaw across an ocean, fury boiling through every vein. He wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. He was fighting for legacy, for family, for justice. And Marcus Daniels was a soldier who did not lose. The base cafeteria was loud with the clatter of trays and the low murmur of soldiers swapping stories. But Marcus sat at the end of the table, shoulders hunched, fists clenched around his untouched meal. His brothers-in-arms noticed. Yo, Daniels, Staff Sergeant Cole said, sliding onto the bench across from him. You look like you're ready to tear down a wall with your bare hands. What's going on? Marcus pushed the tray away and pulled a folded letter from his pocket, the foreclosure notice Denise had scanned and emailed to him. The paper was creased from being opened and reread, his fingerprints smudged across it. "They took my house," Marcus said flatly. At first, the table went silent, as if they hadn't heard him right. Then came the flood. "What do you mean, they took it?" "Daniels, that's your family home. The hell kind of HOA sells a soldier's house while he's overseas?" Marcus's jaw tightened. Sylvia Whitaker, HOA president, said we were delinquent on dues. Denise paid. Twice. They still pushed it to auction. And now my wife and daughter are staring at eviction notices while I'm out here eating chow in the desert. The words hit the table like a grenade. Anger rippled through his fellow soldiers. These were men and women who understood sacrifice. They had left behind families too. The idea that a neighbor, an HOA president, could weaponize bureaucracy against one of their own was unthinkable. Cole slapped his hand against the table. "Nah. This doesn't stand. Not for one of ours." By nightfall, Marcus's story had spread through the barracks. Soldiers who barely knew him stopped by to offer words of support, numbers for legal aid, even contacts in the press. One corporal with a background in JAG, Judge Advocate General's Corps, studied the bylaw clause Sylvia had used and scoffed. "This is garbage." She twisted the language beyond recognition. No judge in their right mind would uphold this if it hits a real courtroom. But Marcus knew Sylvia wasn't counting on a real courtroom. She was counting on fear, exhaustion, and the fact that most families didn't have the strength or resources to fight back. He looked at the corporal. "So we make it a courtroom. We drag her there if we have to." Back home, Denise had begun to unravel. Eviction notices now came weekly, taped brazenly to the front door. Neighbors whispered, some sympathetic, others wary of crossing Sylvia. Only Mr. Jenkins, the old veteran down the street, dared to stop by. "Your husband's father was a good man," he said one evening, pressing Denise's hand in his. "He fought for this country and for this house. Don't you let them steal that legacy. You've got more people behind you than you think." Denise's voice cracked. "I don't know how much more I can fight, Mr. Jenkins. It feels like it's just me against her." Mr. Jenkins gave a dry chuckle. "Then maybe it's time you stop fighting alone." That alone ended sooner than Sylvia expected. One morning, a local reporter knocked on Denise's door. "Mrs. Daniels? I'm with the Daily Herald. We heard about the foreclosure. Is it true your husband is currently deployed overseas?" Denise hesitated, clutching the edge of the door. "Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter who. What matters is the story. If your husband's serving this country while your HOA sells his home, well, the public deserves to know." Denise thought of Marcus, of Kayla, of the late-night tears she'd hidden. She thought of Sylvia's smug smile at the auction. And then she opened the door wider. "Come in." By that evening, the story was online, deployed black veterans home sold by HOA, family faces eviction. The headline spread like wildfire. Veterans groups reposted it, military spouses raged across forums, and neighbors who had once stayed silent found their voices. Phones rang in the Daniels household nonstop, friends, strangers, even a congressman's aide offering help. And overseas, Marcus sat on his bunk staring at the article on his phone, jaw set. Sylvia Whitaker had started a war she didn't understand. And Marcus Daniels had never lost one. Sylvia Whitaker sat in her HOA office, a repurposed spare bedroom with beige walls and neatly stacked files, scrolling through her email when she saw it. Local news, deployed veterans home sold by HOA. The headline blared in bold letters across the screen. Beneath it was a photo of Marcus in uniform, smiling with Denise and Kayla on their front porch. The story painted Sylvia as the villain she had always insisted she wasn't. Her stomach twisted. She clicked the article, her eyes darting across phrases that made her chest tighten: predatory foreclosure, family legacy stolen, community outrage. No, 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 she muttered, slamming her laptop shut. For the first time, Sylvia felt something she hadn't in years: fear. Denise, meanwhile, was stunned by the sudden whirlwind. Calls poured in, veterans groups offering legal counsel, neighbors apologizing for staying quiet, and even a local pastor who promised to rally his congregation. Strangers stopped by with baked goods and donations. But the most powerful call came from Washington. "Mrs. Daniels?" The voice on the other end was clipped, official. "This is Captain Reynolds from JAG. We've been made aware of your situation. Sergeant Daniels' service record speaks for itself. We don't take kindly to families being exploited while our soldiers are overseas. We'll be assigning counsel to your case effective immediately." Denise nearly dropped the phone. Relief surged through her chest like a tide. "Thank you," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. On base, Marcus was summoned to the CO's office. Colonel Myers looked at him with the kind of solemn respect reserved for soldiers who carried not just their own burdens, but those of a nation. "Daniels," Myers said, sliding the article across the desk, "I've read this twice. It makes my blood boil." He leaned forward. "You focus on your mission out here. Let us handle the battle at home. Your brothers and sisters in arms have your back." Marcus clenched his jaw, fighting the swell of emotion. "Sir, with respect, that house isn't just wood and nails. It's my father's legacy. My daughter's safe place. They're not going to take it from us." "They won't," Myers said firmly. "Because we're not going to let them." The pressure campaign began immediately. Letters from veterans organizations flooded the HOA's mailbox. Media vans parked on the cul-de-sac, cameras aimed squarely at Sylvia's pristine lawn. Neighbors who had once whispered now shouted, carrying signs that read, "Justice for the Daniels family and homes, not greed." Sylvia tried to hold her composure. At an emergency board meeting, she slammed her gavel and hissed, "We are within our rights. The bylaws are clear." But Mr. Emerson, her once loyal ally, spoke up. His voice trembled but carried conviction. "No, Sylvia. The bylaws were never meant to strip a soldier's family of their home. You twisted them. And now the whole country sees it." Mrs. Emerson added quietly, "We won't back you anymore." Sylvia's gavel cracked against the table, but the sound no longer carried power. The boardroom she once controlled now felt like quicksand, swallowing her authority inch by inch. The Daniels' new legal team moved fast. Filings hit the courthouse within days, challenging the foreclosure as unlawful. They demanded a stay on eviction and a full audit of the HOA's financial records. What those records revealed made headlines all over again. Sylvia had been padding fines, misreporting payments, and funneling HOA funds into administrative expenses that suspiciously resembled personal vacations and shopping sprees. Denise sat in the lawyer's office, stunned as the evidence mounted. "She wasn't just targeting us," she whispered. "She's been stealing from everyone." The lawyer nodded grimly. "And now we've got her." The story snowballed. National news anchors picked it up, framing it as a test of how America treats its veterans. Talk shows debated it. Lawmakers issued statements of outrage. Sylvia couldn't go to the grocery store without whispers trailing her. Protesters stood outside her house with signs. Her carefully cultivated reputation as the guardian of Willow Creek Estates crumbled overnight. For Denise and Kayla, it was the first breath of hope in months. Each night, Denise called Marcus overseas and told him about the growing wave of support. And though the distance between them was vast, Marcus could almost feel it, the tide turning, the enemy losing ground. "Hold strong," he told his wife. "We're winning this fight. And when I come home, I'll be walking through the same front door I grew up in." "That's a promise." Sylvia sat alone in her darkened kitchen that night, her glass of wine untouched. For the first time, the Queen of Willow Creek Estates realized she was no longer the hunter. She was the hunted. The courtroom was packed. Every seat filled with neighbors, veterans in uniform, reporters with notepads, and curious onlookers who had followed the story on national news. Denise sat in the front row, her hands tightly clasped around Kayla's. Her daughter's small fingers were warm, grounding her in the moment. Behind them, the hum of whispers echoed, "That's the family. They're the ones fighting the HOA." Sylvia sat at the defendant's table, her once pristine suit rumpled, her pearls clutched like a lifeline. The smugness that had defined her reign over Willow Creek Estates had evaporated. Her attorney whispered frantically in her ear, but she kept her eyes fixed forward, jaw tight. Judge Callahan, an older man with silver hair and a sharp gaze, banged his gavel. "This court will come to order." The evidence was damning. Page after page of fraudulent fines, manipulated ledgers, and emails where Sylvia explicitly instructed board members to make an example of the Daniels family. The words hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. The JAG attorney representing Marcus stood tall, his voice clear. While Sergeant Daniels risked his life for this country, his family was targeted, extorted, and illegally stripped of their home. This was not enforcement of bylaws, it was theft wrapped in bureaucracy. And it ends today. When the judge finally spoke, his tone was cutting. The Daniels family has been wronged in a manner both unlawful and unconscionable. This court hereby nullifies the foreclosure and restores full ownership of the Daniels residence to Sergeant Marcus Daniels and his family. Gasps filled the room, followed by cheers from the veterans seated in the back. Denise squeezed Kayla so tightly her daughter laughed through tears. But Judge Callahan wasn't done. He turned his gaze to Sylvia, whose face had gone pale. "As for you, Ms. Whitaker, your abuse of authority, your misappropriation of HOA funds, and your targeting of this family constitute criminal behavior. You are hereby referred for prosecution on charges of fraud and embezzlement." Sylvia's pearl necklace snapped as she lurched forward, her composure finally shattering. The gavel slammed again. The reign of Willow Creek's self-appointed queen was over. The day Marcus came home, the cul-de-sac was lined with flags. Neighbors who once turned away now stood shoulder to shoulder, waving banners and holding signs that read, "Welcome home, Sergeant Daniels." Denise stood on the porch, heart pounding. Kayla clutched a handmade sign covered in glitter, "Welcome home, Daddy." Then, at last, he appeared. Marcus stepped out of the car in full uniform, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. For a moment, he simply stood there, taking it all in, the house that should have been lost, now decorated in red, white, and blue. The home his father built. The place his daughter would grow up in. Denise ran to him first, tears spilling down her cheeks as she fell into his arms. Kayla was right behind her, nearly knocking him over as she wrapped herself around his leg. Marcus dropped his bag and held them both, his chest heaving as emotion overtook him. "I told you," he whispered. "I told you we'd come back here together." The crowd cheered, but in that moment, Marcus heard only the laughter of his daughter and the steady heartbeat of his wife against his chest. That night, a barbecue was held in the Daniels' backyard. Veterans grilled burgers, kids played tag, and neighbors who had once feared Sylvia now laughed freely. Music drifted into the warm evening air. Marcus stood by the porch, gazing at the framed photo of his father hanging in the living room window. The old veteran's smile seemed to glow in the firelight. Denise came up beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Your dad would be proud," she said softly. Marcus nodded. "This house isn't just wood and nails. It's our story. Our fight. And now, it's our victory." He raised his glass as the crowd hushed. "To family, to legacy, and to every soldier who fights battles both abroad and at home. May no one ever steal what we've bled to protect." The cheers rang out, echoing into the night, carried by the wind like a promise. The Daniels family was whole. Their home restored. Their legacy unbroken. And for the first time in a long while, Willow Creek Estates truly felt like a community again.